This is like an online book signing thing. So I'll be signing books, and then I'll be answering questions.
We're going to take 3 phone calls from some lucky winners.
So just like if you stood in line for hours and hours, this is your chance to have a second with Glenn and ask him questions.
We're hanging out again. We are live here at Franklin Entertainment in the office, kicking it. Hi, guys.
I'm going to sign as we go, and you can buy, and we will ship this right to you. And we're also answering questions. Do you have any questions over there?
How does one get on The Bachelor?
As a seasoned comedian, do you ever completely bomb anymore? And if so, how do you deal? Oh, I have the best bombing story.
What's the most satisfying snack to eat while wearing?
This is like an online book signing thing. So I'll be signing books, and then I'll be answering questions.
We're going to take 3 phone calls from some lucky winners.
So just like if you stood in line for hours and hours, this is your chance to have a second with Glenn and ask him questions.
We're hanging out again. We are live here at Franklin Entertainment in the office, kicking it. Hi, guys.
I'm going to sign as we go, and you can buy, and we will ship this right to you. And we're also answering questions. Do you have any questions over there?
How does one get on The Bachelor?
As a seasoned comedian, do you ever completely bomb anymore? And if so, how do you deal? Oh, I have the best bombing story.
What's the most satisfying snack to eat while wearing sweatpants?
Have you girls ever thought about writing a book all together about your teen mom journey?
What inspired you to write about the things you write about in this book? What is the most frightening thing that you've ever done?
What is it like partnering with your sister on a business?
Sean from California, you're live.
You're the lucky winner of the call.
I would love to know what your favorite story that you've covered for Inside Edition is.
I don't know if you remember this or not, but in Atlanta, I was the guy that chased after your car and got the WrestleMania poster signed.
Oh, I remember you.
I wanted to know what it was like seeing the stash plan for the first time when it was like a book and you had a copy of it.
I think I started crying, actually.
You did. You got emotional.
I
had like pure happiness. It was a wonderful moment.
This is great. I hope I get his voicemail. I think this is actually the wrong number. But anyway, I was looking to buy a used Vespa. It was on Craigslist. It was a purple 1973 Vespa. It was missing the seat.
So thank you guys so much for being here. Enjoy the rest of your days. I hope all of you that asked so many questions get some sleep.
Good night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Thanks for tuning in, you guys. Bye.
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 Thank you for watching, folks.
Thank you, everyone. LiveSigning.com.
Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.
I believe this is as close to a hard wrap as I'll ever get, and this is as close to doing home shopping as I'll ever be.
Goodbye, everybody. Thanks for coming. Never get drunk.
Is that how we end it? I spilled water. I'm losing my voice.
Race relations, religion, politics. We live in a very trying time, shark-infested waters. But what better to have times with good leadership than to have a good leader himself? And I am sitting here with, I'm really falling in love with this man as I've read his book, and I'm going to say that you need to read it too. We have Sheriff David Clarke, and it is such an honor. You just did your first book, Cop Under Fire. We're going to be here for the next hour talking with Sheriff Clarke, very blunt conversation, because that's the kind of book this is. This is a no-holds-barred book. And you want the honest truth, you know people in your life right now that need to hear truth and honesty, nothing sugar-coated. Sheriff Clarke does it in the book. In fact, there were times as I've been reading this book that it even took my breath away going, oh no, he didn't. Does he really have that much courage to say? Sheriff Clarke, I'm looking forward to an hour talking about this. And first of all, I have to ask you, there is a lot of boldness in this book. There is a lot of things said in this book that nobody has ever said before. Do you understand the kind of scrutiny and the target that you already have on your back? Saying this kind of truth in America today is going to cause you?
Sure, of course I do. And you know, I in this book, I touch a lot of that third rail stuff politically, right? I talk about race, I talk about crime, police relations with the black community. I talk about issues of race that most people in my environment, they stay away from. They say, don't touch that rail. But you know, and I think it's almost divine intervention that Worthy picked up this book, because you know, my faith plays a strong part of my life, and I know there's a passage in the Bible, I'm not a Bible expert, but it says, be not afraid, okay? And that's how I approach life. Look, if we're going to get beyond, and that's the subtitle, beyond the hashtags of race, crime, and politics for a better America, we're going to get beyond this. We have to have people step up and be willing to have a frank conversation about these issues that have always been dominant in America: race, crime, politics, police. But because if we stay away from it, you know what, the stuff will continue to fester, it'll continue to fester, and you know what happens with problems when you kind of sweep them under the rug? They get worse. So it's what I've always done, and especially in my public life here, and I've been the sheriff in Milwaukee County for 15 years now, and obviously the profile has grown, but I've always been willing to put myself out there on behalf of, this book is A Better America, but on behalf of a better community back home in Milwaukee County. When you're in a position of leadership, you better lead. If you're not going to lead, then get out of there and let somebody else who's going to have the courage to do it to lead. Because anytime you exercise leadership, and I've learned this in some of my educational experiences, you're going to put a target on your back. People are going to come after you. I realize that it happens. Some of it gets ugly. I talk about it in the book. But you know what? I always remind myself too. I say this isn't about you, David. This is about a better America. This is about a better way. This is about moving the ball forward. I don't look at it in terms of solutions, but in terms of moving the ball forward a little bit. And let's get beyond this, and not like we'll never see it again, race, crime, politics, police. It's not that we'll never see it again, but we can advance it into a better state, and that's the objective here. So I had a great experience, great time with it. And really,
you smile, you laugh on this little folks. First of all, this book is available. You can click on it, pre-order the book right now. It's right here on the live stream link. Click on it, get your books early. I'm telling you, they've already sold out. We're here at CPAC. They're already selling quickly. It is available in bookstores February 28th. Are you ready for that day, by the way?
Yes, I am.
Looking forward to it. Your life has changed on the day this book comes out. Now, this is a very raw story. Let's go from the very, very beginning, because it starts with you as a young man. And there's lots of stories about it, but one of the ones I want to talk about, this is kind of a teaser so you know how raw you get. You talk about law enforcement, police officers, a young kid, drive by your house, and you hold up your fist in the air. And what happens next?
Yeah, it was the turbulent 60s back then, and police community relations were not real good. A lot of protests going on in America. The Black Panthers were a prominent radical group at the time, and as a young kid, you can't process a lot of that at the time. I think I was like 12, 13 years old maybe. You can't process things. You do some weird stuff, you do some stupid stuff. You're drawn into movements, and the Black Power thing was huge back at that time, and of course identified with it. Like I said, I'm keeping in mind my age when I say identified with it. I don't know why. I hadn't experienced a lot of the things that people said were going on, even though I know they existed back in the 60s in America. But the essence of starting there is to show that, I was just a rebellious kid. I wasn't like real bad. I wasn't always getting arrested and that getting into trouble, but I was a rebellious kid, and that was kind of just defiance, right? Black power to the police.
That didn't last too long though for you when you did that.
No, the cops backed up and they called me over, and I don't want to ruin the book for people, but here was the essence of it. My dad was there for me. I grew up in an intact family, lower middle class. We didn't have a lot, but my dad was there. My dad provided that love, that oversight, that discipline, and so when he saw this interaction from inside house, he came outside and he intervened in a very respectful way. My dad was in the military. My dad understands respect for authority. He asked what was going on. The cops explained. My dad just said, "I'll handle this." And they knew he would. And they said, "Have a nice day." My dad said, "Get in the house." And then from there, you can read the book to find out what happened. But see, and I talk about this throughout the book, the role that dads play. Had my dad not have been there, that could have turned very ugly in a very short period of time. We look at situations, bring it today, Mike Brown. You look at Eric Garner. These are guys who grew up without dads, who didn't have that guidance to teach them virtues, respect for authority, discipline, things like that. And you see it play out now, and you get into the outside world, you come against an authority figure and you don't know how to respect authority. You're going to push back, you're going to rebel, it's going to turn to confrontation. And I'm telling you right now, as we saw in Ferguson, Missouri, New York, Baltimore, when you confront an authority figure or presence, they're not going to back down. They're just not going to. So dads, I think, missing from a lot of these young men's lives. So they grow up angry with this chip on the shoulder, and then they're going to be guided by negative forces, whereas I was guided by my dad's love, attention, and the fact that he was there for me.
Well, that's a very almost an unpopular thing to have after this last election. It was all about women power. That's what we continuously hear. And then women do play, mothers do play an important role. I'll be the first to say that. However, this book right here comes out and says you have to have a male authority figure, and it comes down to respect, law and order. President Trump has said we're going to have peace by strength here in the United States. And you start off, and it starts within the home. Like you said, your father said, I've got it. And the police knew he had it. They didn't know him, but they knew just because of that apparent right there.
You know, there's an African proverb that says, the ruin of a nation begins in the homes of its people. And that is very true.
That's extremely true. And I'll even say this, there's another proverb that comes from it, that it takes a village. And it does take a village. And you talk about the people that have influenced you. Believe it or not, Hillary Clinton was not the first one to have that, but it actually goes back to an African proverb.
As a support structure, exactly. I think. But I think it takes two effective parents. Sometimes it can be one, you know, that has happened, but you're fighting the odds. But then when you're not in the home, within the neighborhood, you have support structures and your neighbors watching out for you. You had this, and that's where the village comes in. But actually, the kid needs to be raised inside that home.
Well, we're going to be signing books here as we're talking. We're having this conversation. There is an interesting part. It's very cool that you got this, because you had Sean Hannity, who is a good friend of yours. He actually did the foreword for this book, and it is a very, once again, Sean never holds anything back, does he?
No, he doesn't.
And he did not hold it back, and he does very few forewords, actually. Congratulations on this. But he ends his foreword, and I am going to tell you this about it. It says, the right book about race for these racially confusing times. Now, let's talk about that. And I want to ask you, because I know you and Sean probably had a conversation about this, what factors do you believe are present right now that makes for a very confusing times regarding race relations?
All right, first of all, race has always been an explosive issue in the United States of America. Always. You know what? There is not a lot you can do about that. It's one of those things where I say we want to move the ball forward. You can't make it go away. However, we've become race obsessed. Everything is viewed by too many segments in this society through the prism of race. So you have an incident and right away it's, well, what's the racial component? That's what I mean through the lens of race. When a lot of these things that we're talking about, then it really isn't a racial component, but since we're so race obsessed, we know there's got to be one. It's like with Ferguson, Missouri, Mike Brown. He attacked a law enforcement officer. That's not a race issue. He happened to be black. The cop happened to be white. That should have been viewed in the prism of the rule of law. You cannot attack police officers in this country. So, you know, we end up doing that. And then there are purveyors of this race obsession because it's turned into a cottage industry, and I talk about that in the book. There's political power to be had. We saw that during the this last presidential cycle. There's money to be made. Look at Al Sharpton. I talk about that. So it's become a cottage industry where they want to further this conflict and confrontation between the races, you know, to make money, to gain prestige and to gain political power. But it's at a very high price for the country as a whole.
When we talk about the evolution, and you call it Black Lives Matter, and I agree with that. Like I said, you start off talking about Black Panthers, and we've already discussed it a little bit today. I want to talk about Black Lives Matter, and you go through history and you talk about how different officers and law enforcement, there's always been a target on law enforcement's back. I mean, of anybody else, there's always been a target by these groups to go after law enforcement. Why is that?
Well, let's go back a little bit. And what I've tried to do, and that's what I've done in putting this book together, I'm a student of history, so I like to go back and I ask myself, how did we get to this point? And then you got to go backwards to do that. There's always been conflict in the black community between law enforcement and certain members, not everybody in the black community. And because we had an ugly chapter in this, we had an ugly chapter in the history of this country. We did. I admit that. You look at the 60s, you look at the 40s, you look at Jim Crow, you know, that was backed by law enforcement. All right, you look at the 60s with the civil rights marches when law enforcement was given the latitude to turn fire hoses on people and sick dogs on truly peaceful protesters, not riots, truly peaceful protesters. But guess what? There came a point in time in this country where America as a whole said, that's enough. That's enough law enforcement. We aren't going to tolerate that anymore. And we derive our authority, when I talk about police being authority figures, we derive that from the consent of the government. And the government said, that's it. And when I said as a country, white people said, that's it. You folks are going to have to change. We're going to give you a chance to change yourselves, or we're going to do it. And you know what? We changed. All right? We did. We are more professional. We are more disciplined. We are more educated as a profession. Now this is a profession. It's not just a job. But we're more educated. We're more professional than any time in our history because the country demanded it. So you fast forward today, Black Lives Matter. This thing's a myth.
Okay.
It's a myth because there is no data or research. When I say no, I'm saying a zero data to support what they're claiming, which is why I call it black lies. It is a lie. It is a myth. You know, that law enforcement officers, you know, as a policy, go out and, you know, harass young black men. I mean, and I said, because I've seen studies to the contrary, and I'm looking for one that supports their claim. You can't find it, which is why I said this thing is a lie. This thing is not really a movement to improve the lives of black people, because when you look at black on black crime, they are silent. They are nowhere to be found. Who disproportionately represents being victimized by crime? Black people. Who disproportionately represents being the perpetrators of that violent crime in these urban centers? Black suspects. They say nothing about that. Let's look at the issue of abortion. Planned Parenthood kills more black babies per year than any other demographic. Where's the outrage from Black Lives Matter if black life truly matters? So I can point to substantive things, and I do that in the book. That's why I encourage people to read it, to get more in depth into this. I don't care about black lives. This is a political movement. I said that in December of 2014. I identified that when I say I said it, that means I was probably in front of a camera. And I said, this is a political construct. I said, this is a hate group. And of course, the leftist media was all aghast. He called Black Lives, it is a hate group, okay? So this anti-police rhetoric has caused police in these high crime areas, the only people who truly believe that Black Lives Matters is the American law enforcement officer. How can I prove that? Who's in these crime-infested areas trying to keep black people safe? It's not Black Lives Matter, it's the police. So, you know, I look, and now police are pulling back in some of these high crime areas, and we've seen violent crime spike precipitously because of it. That is at a detriment to black life. It does not help black life.
Well, that's my question. You look at Chicago, you look even at Baltimore, and you see officers that are of both colors that are in these, and yet they still riot. They call it a race issue. You saw an amazing officer down in South Carolina that was involved in an issue there, and they said it was racist. He was a black officer, went to Liberty University, and wanted to always be following his father's footsteps. And he did what the jury eventually found out was the right thing. And yet, all of a sudden, you were to cry race. Do we have a problem in recruiting? Would it help to have more black officers? And do we have a problem recruiting within the communities and law enforcement in the future, but especially of a diverse law enforcement? Would that help the situation?
No, I'm not buying that. And I think it's a slippery slope to move toward that, and here's why. If we're going to get beyond this you know, you're black, I'm white, you're Hispanic, I'm this, I'm gay, you're the. If we're going to get beyond that, we have to stop seeing people within these labels and start seeing them as just human beings, right? And then we'll figure it out.
But isn't that racist? I've been accused because if I look at you and I say, but I don't see skin color, I'm accused of that being racist because I don't see skin color.
Well, I'll give you an example. Why am I labeled? I talk about that in the book too. I think that's one of the better chapters.
Absolutely.
You know, when I had this epiphany with myself, and I did. It is one of the better chapters in the book. If you buy the book and just read that chapter, I think you'll be blown away because people.
You won't just read that chapter, by the way.
No, it'll make you go back and read. That's what I
write.
But people ask me, well, how did you turn out the way you did? First of all, I said it was my middle class upbringing by my parents, who were both black, right? But they instilled middle class values. Why middle class? It isn't that they ran away from the black culture. They always taught us to embrace that, but they adopted middle class values and pass them on to their kids, because that's where things are happening in the United States in the middle class. If you're going to thrive, getting a job, some of these things like that, buy better housing for your family, whatnot, you're going to have to thrive in the middle class. So they basically raised me to see people as people, not a black guy, an Asian guy, a lesbian girl. They didn't. They just said, that's a human being, that's a human being, that's a human being, that's a human being. So, the black police officer thing, if we hired more, look, there's a study out, and none of these studies that I cite are done by any right-wing polling group or research firm, and it showed that statistically there's no fall off between the use of force between a black officer and a black suspect, or a white officer and a black suspect. And actually, I think it shows, and I want to be clear on this, so I might not be, so forgive me, there's a tendency for the statistics to be higher of a black using force, a black officer using force against a black suspect, and at the same time, when they did this study, whites are a little more hesitant to use that force. See, those are the studies that are out there that, of course, the liberal mainstream media is not going to touch because it doesn't further their narrative. But I say, you know what? When I recruit, do you want a diverse force? Police force? Yeah, but that's not the goal. The goal is to get, because we call them our community's finest. The goal is to go out and get the best men and women that are going to be a good fit for this profession, because you're given a lot of authority. And one of the worst things we could have happen, that we've been fortunate as relates to other countries, especially third world, is corruption in law enforcement because of the awesome authority we have. So if we want to keep that out of there, we can't lower hiring standards to meet a diversity agenda. And sometimes that's what you have to do.
Action actually works opposite.
Yeah,
in that case.
It does. So I say I'm going to always, and guess what? I look at the command staff that I put together, 17 or 22 people, higher ups. It's a very diverse staff. I never set out to say I want a certain amount of women, a certain amount of blacks. But you look at my staff, it is as diverse as Milwaukee County. And I try to hire the same way. I don't look and say we need more black. But if you do this the way it should be done, you're going to end up with a diverse staff, not even trying. Because if you see people as human, all that other stuff doesn't matter.
Well, we're also taking your questions right now. If you're watching this live stream, you can actually type in your questions. I'm reading through them. That's what I'm looking at you doing. And we've got, it's filling up. I want to ask you a question. Peter from Estvale, California. What can members of law enforcement, I imagine he's a member of it, in California do, and across the country, in order to help correct the anti-police, anti-law, and order culture in our politicians and in our public policy? Can law enforcement, members of law enforcement are frustrated. How can they be able to correct this sort of stigma that's being created?
Well, first of all, the stigma is a lie. But
well,
so
yes,
you're asking how
can law enforcement
refute the lie?
Right.
This has got to be done by police executives, chiefs, sheriffs. We set policy. We speak on behalf of the organization. We speak to these issues. What I tell the cops, and I've met cops all across this country, 39 states I visited over the last couple of years, speaking to police groups since the days of Ferguson, speaking on these issues. And I remind them, I say, you guys focus on going out and serving people in your community. Your community needs you. Let me handle the politics. What I was saying there was police executives got to get up there. You can't, in other words, if you have an organization, let's take NYPD, you have 40,000 cops. You can't have 40,000 cops expressing their opinion about what police should be, because you get this mixed message. You get people who say something stupid, you get people who say something wrong, and then I got to go out there and correct that. So I say, you guys do your job, stick to the policies, stick to the code of conduct. We all have one. How you used to treat citizens, this sort of thing. Stick to the Constitution. I say, you do that, the community's going to look and say, they're doing what they should do. And then with the cop haters out there, I say, let me deal with that. And I'm the one that should be pushing back. So when a law enforcement officer on the front line asks, what can we do? I say, just go out and do what your community needs you to do. Your chief, but see, this is the problem with a lot of these agencies, because the cops will come back and say, but our chief won't stand up and fight.
I hear that all the time.
That's the problem. It's not the cops. These police executives sheriffs, chiefs, and not only, but the higher ups in the organization, they're going to have to develop the moral courage to go out there and tell the truth about this with data, supported with data and research. Okay, we've looked at the numbers in this thing, and here's what it's showing us. And, you know, admit when something goes wrong. I mean, we're human. Sometimes we make mistakes. When something goes wrong and it's a mistake of the head and not the heart, and there's a difference. If it's of the head, you intended to make that. If it's a heart, hey, you know, you made a wrong guess. You guessed, you shouldn't have guessed, but you did, and you made the wrong one. We need to be willing to say, you know, I made a mistake there. That was, and we're going to go back and correct it. And here's how we're going to do that. And you have to say this to the public at the news conference when there's a bad shooting or questionable shooting, which is rare anyway, unlike the police haters would make it appear. So, you know, I think if they stay in their lanes and they do that, and that's what they really appreciate me for, to say, Sheriff, thanks for being our voice in this. When you say, how can we change the dynamic? There aren't enough executives out there that will join me, or even they don't have to join me in the national stage, but within their community. Stand up when your cop is involved in a shooting or a use of force or something. It doesn't always have to be a shooting. You know, you need some time to gather the facts. But as soon as you hear myths and propaganda being perpetrated,
fake news,
like hands up, don't shoot, you need to get out there right away and go, that is a lie. We're still investigating this thing. We have nothing so far. We're continuing to look. We have nothing so far that would substantiate that lie. And call it a lie. That's what it is. It's done on purpose. And when you do that, you know what? The cops will hear that. You're really speaking, the cops will go, good, he's got our back. And that doesn't mean you don't think your cops can do any wrong, because I get that a lot. You know, well, you know, some cops, I go, yeah, some in any profession, you got bad doctors, right? You got bad lawyers, you have bad politicians. I go, because it's part of the human condition, but it's my job to identify those people who aren't a good fit, get them out of here. And if I'm not doing my job as an elected official, I expect the public at election time to make a change.
Do you think it's going to be easier to have politics? I mean, we've been kind of lacking good leadership, and a good example of that from the Oval Office. Now we have President Trump. Do you think that we're going to see, and you talk about this, the evolution, do you think there's going to be more of a positive step forward in trying to solve some of these problems within these? I mean, we've these race relations that have somehow seemed to divide more under the last 8 years. But yet they say we have President Trump that we're not going to be even more divided, which I think that's a false narrative, that we're actually going to be more unified now with a president.
You know, I've gotten a chance to talk to Donald Trump, President Donald Trump. A few times. Yeah, and that's why I keep, you know, I mean no disrespect, I keep calling him Donald Trump, because during the campaign,
I do Mr. President. I can't get out
that's
of
what
Mr.
he was,
President.
and so every day, or every time I saw him or talked to him, it was,
Mr. Trump.
You know, Mr. Trump, Donald. It wasn't President, but one of the things I had said was, I think the next president, one of the first things they should do in the first 100 days is deliver a Gettysburg-type address to help this nation begin to heal. That's what Abraham Lincoln did after the Civil War, right? Very difficult time in this country. And I think he's done that, because if you notice his inaugural speech, it almost brought tears in my eyes to listen to that speech. And it kind of mirrored his convention speech. He made it clear that everybody in America was going to benefit under his administration. He didn't care who you are, he didn't care what you are. As long as you were upstanding, as long as you were living by society's rules, not his rules, society's rules, as long as you worked hard. And he pointed out, he said, the people living in our inner cities are living in a hellhole. It is a hellhole. He wasn't afraid to say that. Basically what he's saying is, and he said this, you deserve a better way of life. So one of the other things that he did was he talked throughout the whole campaign. That's what drew me to him, really, was his clear vision. But he always talked positively about the important role of law enforcement, support for law enforcement officers. And he continues to this day. He said it last week in a speech that he delivered. He continues with that message of support for law enforcement, because President Trump understands the difficult dynamic that law enforcement is. We deal in an environment of uncertainty. He also understands that things can sometimes go terribly wrong, but he also understands that the people living in these crime-ridden areas deserve a safe community who provides that. we do.
Absolutely. Okay, so here's a question from Thomas from Westchester, Pennsylvania. Keep your questions coming in. You can go on and click on the link above to actually purchase the book ahead of time by Tuesday. It will be available Tuesday, the 28th, in all of your local bookstores. But keep your questions coming in here on the live stream. Thomas from Westchester, Pennsylvania. How do you think the black community can overcome this apparent cultural belief that being successful in America is a form of selling out that should be demonized? And you also talk about this in regards to education. Education is a very big part of you, and a couple of chapters in this book actually is devoted to education.
Yeah, you know, that is an outstanding question, because that is one of the hurdles we have to get over within the black community. When I say within the black community, I'm talking about myself being black. Okay, and that's what I think gives me license to say some of the things that I do in this book and touch some of those third rails, because I've lived black. Okay, grew up black.
Hold on. What does it mean to live black? Help me out. And then you said talk about this.
Well, because we're a race-obsessed culture, society, I can't get around that. When people see me, I mean, and they do this sometimes innocently. You know what I'm viewed as? A black conservative. Why am I not just a conservative? Right? A black sheriff. Why am I not just a sheriff? I mean, is Sheriff Joe Arpaio, former sheriff of Maricopa County, he's never referred to as the white sheriff. But with me, and that's what I mean, I live black, because there's no escaping it. You can see it. Okay, fine, big deal. Rush Limbaugh, who I admire, he's not looked at as a white conservative. They don't say the white conservative, but David Clarke is the black conservative. That's what I mean, okay? My parents lived under some Jim Crow laws. So when I say I've lived black, and they've shared those experiences with me. Very ugly time in the history of this country, but we got better as a nation. My dad served in a segregated unit of the military. My dad fought for this country. My dad is an airborne ranger, fought in Korea, did several combat jumps under fire, risked his life to defend freedom and liberty in a segregated army. So when I say I live black,
isn't that hard to think that that's even within our reach? Generations that your father, that's how different it was from today.
Right, and you know what? He didn't quit, and he didn't say, my dad, by the way, he enlisted. Wasn't drafted, he enlisted. But he didn't go, all the hell with this. This country's, even though, you know, it was an ugly chapter. He felt, we'll straighten this out. But freedom and liberty were important to him. Okay, because if nothing else, what were black people struggling for during slavery? Freedom.
So why?
To be free, self-rule. Those concepts that are grounded in the Constitution. Freedom, liberty, self-rule. So that's what I mean by I live black, okay? We came up in a different country than many of the forefathers of white descendants. But, you know, getting back to the question, here's what has to happen. Black political leadership in these cities, we're talking about cities, right? Not a lot of black people live in rural areas. They're going to have to develop the moral courage to stand up and start to shame, shun, and condemn some of the cultural rot and some of the cultural dysfunction that has seeped its way into the black community, not affecting the black community as a whole. And I'm very clear, and I point this out, I'm talking about the black underclass. That black underclass is growing, and they're hanging on to this cultural dysfunction, these cultural stunting behaviors, like school failures. Look, you know, education's a white thing, right? That is culturally dysfunctional to think like that. Settling disputes by violence, that is culturally dysfunctional. Having all these kids out of wedlock. You know, look, any woman can get pregnant. I mean, like, okay, you heard the, well, whatever. But you can't do that 3, 4, 5, 6 times by different men. That is culturally dysfunctional. So we have to have people like Elijah Cummings, Congress, represents the Baltimore area. It's a troubled area. We have to have people like John Conyers of Michigan, who represents the area of Detroit. We have to have people like Gwen Moore, who's the congresswoman represents Milwaukee. We have to have them develop the moral courage to stand up and say what I'm saying, that, hey, this is culturally dysfunctional. We're going to shame and condemn this stuff. We're going to do it as a community. Because when whites do it, of course, they're going to be labeled as racist. You don't understand. You don't. So that's what's going to happen for it to change, because the black community as a whole is going to have to collectively sit down and say, we got to do a self-examination. Sure, there are some things in America that hold us back. Because I talk about, racism exists in this country, not in the form that it did when my mom and dad were growing up, not when my ancestors were slaves, when people like Frederick Douglass and Ida, not like that. But, like I said, my dad served in a segregated army, okay? Discrimination exists today, but that stuff's been driven underground by society. They go, no, that doesn't mean it went away, but it cannot happen. It's episodic now. It is not systemic. And when I hear Barack Obama and heard Barack Obama say racism is still systemic in America, that's a lie. I look at myself as an example. How did I get elected? In a diverse county where I need whites to vote for me, because they still represent the majority of people. How did I get elected if racism was alive and well, right? So until that happens, this self-examination, and there's also this other aspect. And this is what I mean when I talk about I live black. I live black. There's this unwritten rule that blacks can't criticize each other in public. And I go, why not? Why not? Except when you're a black conservative, because then they criticize me, other blacks, and it's okay to do that. That's some of that cultural dysfunction. But this stuff that is working against us, we can't be afraid to call it out. And so that's that self-criticism. There are some things that Barack Obama did. I was very critical of Barack Obama, not as a black president, but his progressive policies that I thought held the black community back. So when I talk about Barack Obama in public, though, when I spoke and criticizing him, not as a human being, but as his policies, of course, not all blacks would say, well, you shouldn't be criticizing. And I go, why not? Other races do it. Whites criticize George Bush. Whites criticize Ronald Reagan. Whites criticize Donald Trump. But all of a sudden we get to blacks, and blacks can't criticize each other. I think that is culturally stunting.
Well, talking about culture, we hit race, we've hit a little bit of education. I want to talk about the third part that plays a very large role. I think why you went with Worthy Books, which is a Christian publisher. And Paul from Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, actually asked the question, I think so many, hopefully who are watching this, who are going to buy your book are going to ask you, how may we, the people, pray for you? And you talk about prayer and faith throughout this entire book and how it's been so integral for you and how you carry a prayer book. What right now is the prayer that people should be having for not only you, but people in your position, whether there be sheriffs, law enforcement, leadership, that are trying to change the narrative? Yeah,
I like that question too, because my faith's a big part of my life. Look, I'm a sinner. The reason why I'm not ashamed to admit that, because we're all sinners. I just have the courage to admit it.
It takes courage to admit you're a sinner.
Yeah, but I'm also forgiven. Okay, I'm forgiven because I pray for forgiveness. But here's what people can do in praying for me. In whatever way they pray, I'm not going to tell them, say this prayer, that prayer. Pray for me for guidance from the Lord. Pray for compassion. Pray that I have understanding. Pray that I have humility. Pray that I have empathy. Those are the elements that in this position I'm going to continue to retain. And so that's how I pray. I say, Lord, give me the strength. Some days here's how I pray. When I'm going through a tough time, and here's my prayer. Lord, give me the strength. That's all I say. That's praying. I'm asking for strength. Lord, keep me humble. Lord, help me maintain the compassion for people who are struggling and that's how I pray. And I get it a lot from people as I move through the public square. People say a lot, we're praying for you. And I say, keep me in your prayers. This is a very tough, I don't want anybody to think that this is easy. This is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It's a fight every day. It's a struggle every day. But better people than me have dealt with more difficult things. Some of the people I talk about in this book, Dr. Martin Luther King, Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln. And I say better people than me have done this. And I think they were guided by their faith as well. So if you're going to pray for me, I never pray for success. I never pray for anything. I say, because I believe in that aspect of the Lord's Prayer that says, thy will be done. Thy will be done. So I'll oftentimes say, Lord, whatever you think is best for me. So even like when I'm in an election time, I don't pray to win. I don't pray to win. I say, Lord, you'll tell me. If it's meant to be to serve you in this capacity, I'll win this election. I truly believe it. And I say, if not, I'll look at it as a sign that he wants me to do something else. So that's an example of how I'm guided by my faith. And you're right. I think Worthy and us, I think it's a good fit. There's some synergy there because of the role that my faith plays. And, of course, Worthy being a Christian publisher.
Well, now, so since we're on the issue of faith, you have a chapter, and it's chapter 11, and it was one that I had to actually the only one that I had to keep rereading just till I got up. God is not the enemy, but he's being attacked in this country. You're in law enforcement. You see this. Where do you see most this attack happening, and who's causing it? Where's it coming from?
Well, there's a movement in this country. It's gone on for a very long time. We started out, everything about the Constitution, everything about American life when this country was founded and first started was based on Christian values, based on faith.
That's very controversial. You'll hear the near-sayers, and you've debated them, where they say, that's not, we added under God in our pledge later on in the 1950s.
The pledge.
The separation of church and state, which I love that argument right there.
Right. But the Constitution came before the Pledge of Allegiance. So and the Declaration of Independence, it's right in there. They talk about the divine and the providence of all right? They talk about that because they were guided by their faith. They weren't religious zealots, but they understood. I think it was Thomas Jefferson, as a matter of fact, one of the founding fathers. Don't hold me to Jefferson. He said something to the effect that if this country does not maintain itself under Christian values, we don't deserve to be free. It was something to that effect. I could find it if need be, but it's true. Okay, they were guided by that. Guided. I didn't say they were controlled by it. They were guided. So, you look today, and there's a movement towards secularism, removing God from the public square. Look at all the fights over if you put a crucifix, in a park or something, and people, the ACLU and the atheist movement, go to court to have that thing removed and all that nonsense. Just leave people alone. See, we have freedom of religion in this country, not freedom from religion. And so if you don't want to believe that there's a divine and that there's a superior being, which I believe there is a God, and I believe that he sent his son down here to redeem and to save. If you don't believe it, fine. I wouldn't come and try to convince you otherwise, but why are you going to stop me from believing? And that's what this movement is, which is why I think it's so wrong. Just leave me alone about my faith. So there's this movement toward a more secular society, and I'm telling you right now, we are paying the consequences of that. You look at some of the things going on in society. You look at the crime. You look at the violence. A lot of this has to do with the fact that our faith doesn't play a role anymore. Churches are empty, right? Kids aren't growing up in a church. I grew up in a church. I went to a Catholic grade school. I went to a Jesuit high school. Part of my college, my bachelor's degree was at a Lutheran university. So it's always played, and I'm not saying I've been a perfect Christian, but it's always been there, in some sort of way. And now God, by the secularists, it's the enemy, because they're trying to marginalize that influence that God has in many people's lives, and I think the country's paying for that dearly.
Well, I'm going to tell you, this is just, we've spent the last 45 minutes, and it's gone by so quick. So many more questions I want to ask. There is so much more in this book, and folks, you've been blunt in this interview. If you think this is blunt, even more in this book right now. Available on Tuesday in all of your bookstores, published by Worthy Publishing. You can go online, continue right now. Pre-order it. I'm telling you, this is going to sell out quickly because this is one of those books that once you read it, you're going to tell somebody else to read it, go buy it. Go on, and so once that starts, I promise you, they're going to, I'm not just saying that because I'm biased, but I have to tell you, my mother and I have fought the last week over this book. And between her and I, we have it marked up as to points that we want to send to our friends and our family. That's the wisdom that is in here for so many. I wish you the best. I'm praying for you. I know the rest of the country is praying for you. What is the one reason, and now that this is over, that you look at it, that you see to be the main theme that you want people to take away? When they close the book, what's the main thing you want them to think?
Well, better understanding of me, but if you want proof as to what you just said, yesterday the book was on sale here at CPAC, and 100 copies went in 20 minutes. They sold out, and a guy that when I was walking to this interview today, a guy was walking, toward me, and he said, he yelled out, "I bought your book yesterday, read the first 2 chapters last night." He said, "You are the real deal." No,
how did he stop at the first 2 chapters? That was our problem, is literally my mother stayed up all night and then I got it the next night. You want to keep reading, and that's the best part about it.
Here would be my suggestion, just a suggestion. I'm an avid reader. Read it through first, and then go back, and because if you like doing it that way, that's fine. That's really, I read like you do. It take me forever because I'm highlighting, I'm going back, and hey, this is interesting. And but when I close the book, and I just want people to have a better understanding of who David Clarke is, because even though I've reached some national prominence, people only get sound bites of me on TV. And they'll hear me say something, and then they'll say, "Oh, I disagree." And people come up to me and say, "You said this," and I explain why. They go, "Oh, I kind of get it now." And I said, "Yeah, because you only heard a soundbite. So this is not soundbite, folks."
This is definitely not soundbites. Cop Under Fire, available February 28th. God bless you. God bless you for writing this. Major strength and courage it did take to have this. Thank you, Worthy. And like I said, look forward to seeing all the success you get on this.
Thanks a lot.